South Australia's trained up 100,000 dedicated COVID marshals to make sure businesses, restaurants, bars and their customers all follow social distancing and hygiene rules, and in preparation for the return of international tourists, including potentially Kiwis. From Friday, New Zealanders are able to travel to New South Wales and the Northern Territory without quarantine at the Aussie end, but they will have to isolate on return to New Zealand. South Australia is keen to be the next state to open up and has also launched a voucher scheme to help breathe life into its struggling CBDs. South Australian Tourism Commission's marketing man, Brent Hill, sets out to impress us with his COVID marshals in a laid-back sort of Aussie way.
The trained COVID marshals, basically that's an initiative that's been put in place for our hospitality areas. So the primary thing that they do is just ensure that the rules that are in place are being followed. So you have one per venue, and they basically just ensure that things like, people were remaining seated when drinking, for example, when that was a rule, that they weren't dancing and drinking at the same time, just ensuring that the COVID plans are being put in place.
So do they have any powers?
They do, in the sense that, they're obviously not the police or anything in that sort of sense. So it's a gentle reminder to people to just inform them of what's going on. My own experience of it has been really good. The people have just simply said, "Can we just remind you about the rules?" And everyone's respectful of that, and I haven't seen or heard of any issues.
So what's the deal then? Were you standing too close to someone? Do they come around with a ruler or something and say, "Could you please step back, Brent"?
I was having a beer with a friend, was holding a beer, having a conversation, and was just gently reminded by the COVID marshal that I needed to find a seat, which was completely fine, and obviously something that I was very happy to do, because at least I was able to have a beer.
So is this a state rule? Are these marshals compulsory for every business to have?
It is part of having a COVID plan, yes, yep.
So who pays their wages? How does it work?
So in more often than not, they're part of the organisation already. So, for example, at my local coffee shop, the COVID marshal there was somebody who was already there as a barista. In a pub sort of scenario, it's probably the manager or somebody of that nature.
And I don't mean to be flip when I say this, but we're really curious about it. So do they wear a badge or something? Are they identifiable? Do you know they're the COVID marshal?
Yeah, they do. That's part of the process. So some of them have taken it to the next level, of course, and have a bit of fun with it. And so wearing, beautiful bright coloured vests or a hat or something of that nature. But part of the rules were that you had an identifiable COVID marshal. And I think in some cases people asked them questions and so on. So they wanted to be able to identify them. And so, as I say, in most cases, it's very obvious who they are.
So, obviously they play a serious role, keeping everybody in line and abiding by the rules. But how much of this is about reassuring the public that you've got it under control and say, Kiwis who at some point might be able to come and visit you soon?
Oh, look, exactly. I mean, to be honest, they're a very subtle presence. It's not like, you feel like you're being watched all the time. I mean, if we welcomed our Kiwi friends over here very shortly, which we hope to, and they weren't aware of all of the rules, for example, I'm sure that these guys would just wander over and, politely inform them about things. But generally, my experience has been it's been all positive. There hasn't really been any issues.
We've been faced with a situation here in New Zealand where CBDs are really struggling, right? The central business district, people, because we've had lockdowns and they haven't returned in the same kind of numbers. Are you guys seeing the same problem, and what are you doing to draw people back in?
Yeah, so in the regions it was strong, but in the CBD it's well down. In some cases it was up to 80% down. What we've found as well is that traditionally, the weekends would be a bit softer in a CBD because of all that business traffic and so on. The weekends are actually now up around sort of the 45 to 50%, but still the weekdays are a little bit softer as that business traffic starts to come in. So we're finding that, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday starting to pick up, but still on a whole, that city vibe as workers come back into the city, that's the really key thing that we're trying to help drive.
And are you incentivising people? What's this voucher system?
We're giving people $100 off an overnight stay, and in the regions, $50 off an overnight stay. So, for example, with the CBD, there's a number of 5-star hotels that are going to be $55 per night, and in some cases, you can get a 4-star hotel or a 3-star hotel who's decided to put an offer in, which is as low as around $1 to $10. So, what we really wanted to do was we wanted to make it that it was such incredible value that people would just go, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this, right? Because obviously if you live in the state and you live in the city and you're being asked to stay in the city, people go, well, my house is only 20 minutes away. So it has to be something that's an incredible value. And then they think, wow, this is really exciting. I can go and do something.
So who carries the cost of that? Is that the individual businesses?
No, it's actually us, the South Australian Tourism Commission. So we have put together this plan. It will cost around $4 million. But what we saw was that we needed to help the CBD to really recapture that vibe. So we're really confident that what we'll see is people going, I'm going to make a whole weekend of it, and that they'll actually go out on, say, a Thursday night, go and have some drinks with friends, then go and stay over, and then the next day probably take a day off. And go to the art galleries and go to cafes, etc. So it has a real multiplier effect.
So as of Friday, I think it is, Kiwis can come to certain parts of Australia, right? So as of Friday,
Yeah.
Kiwis can head over to see, their Australian counterparts have a bit of a trip around, but not to South Australia. Are you feeling a bit peeved about that?
Absolutely devastated. Look, we think from our perspective in South Australia, we are very ready to go. We have had very, very low cases and certainly no community transmission cases for a number of months now. So we are certainly ready to go here in Adelaide. We have direct flights previously from Auckland to Adelaide. So what we're really waiting for is the opportunity where there's freedom of travel both ways. So I think at the moment, with that, the fact that when you go back to New Zealand, you still have to go through a quarantine period. We think that the best opportunity is when you can go freely both ways.
Could you pick up your computer and turn around and just show us what we're missing out on? What can you see out there?
I certainly can. This is what Kiwis are going to be wanting to come to South Australia to get their view.
It'd have to be pretty good because, it's pretty good here in New Zealand, especially if you're in Auckland, which is the city of sales. Oh, okay.
Yeah, just bear with me a second.
Yeah, no, we will.
If you're a Kiwi, today is about 28, 29 degrees. I think this is pretty much where you could just kick back, grab a glass of wine or a gin, and away you go.
And that was Brent Hill from the South Australian Tourism Commission trying to coax us all over there when we can, in fact, leave the country.